It was February of 1985 in Dallas, Texas. World-renowned cosmologist Alan Sandage was about to step onto the platform at a conference on science and religion. The topic being discussed would be about the origin of the universe. The panel was going to be divided among those scientists who believed in God and those who didn't. The scientists who believe in God would sit together on one side of the stage, and the ones that didn't would sit on the other. At this time, Alan Sandage, protege to legendary astronomer Edwin Hubble, was considered the greatest cosmologist in the world. Now you may be wondering, what exactly is a cosmologist? A cosmologist is an astronomer who studies the origin of the universe, from the Big Bang on through today, and then on into the future. It covers a massive scope. And as Sandage approached the stage, there seemed to be little doubt about where he would sit. Those who would have been familiar with him would think him to be an atheist. At least that's the information they had about him. But suddenly the room was abuzz. Sandage didn't sit with the atheist. He took his seat among the theists, those who professed a belief in God. And then something even more amazing was revealed. During his talk about the Big Bang, he shared that he had decided to become a Christian at age 50. He told his audience, I'm sure their mouths were hanging wide open, he said, "The Big Bang was a supernatural event that cannot be explained within the realm of physics as we know it. Science has taken us to the first event, but it can't take us further to the first cause. The sudden immersion of matter, space, time, and energy," he went on to say, "pointed to the need for some kind of transcendence." Translation: science can only take us so far regarding the origin of the universe. Something bigger must explain what caused that first event scientists call the Big Bang. He explained later to a reporter, "It was my science that drove me to the conclusion that the world is much more complicated than can be explained by science. It was only through the supernatural that I can understand the mystery of existence." Sandage is not alone. There are a growing number of specialists at the highest levels of achievements who claim a belief in God, not despite the scientific evidence, but because of it. Like Sandage, many scientists are now driven to faith by their very work. At the same conference, Dean Kenyon, a biophysicist who had co-authored the book Biochemical Predestination, was also scheduled to speak. His book attempted to explain how the first living cell could have self-assembled from non-living matter. However, Kenyon stunned the audience, as Sandage had before him. As he stepped to the podium and began his talk, he unabashedly rejected his own book. He had come to the point where he now believed that the best evidence pointed toward a designer of life. What changed his mind? Science. Specifically, the discovery of the immense complexity of the cell and the information-bearing properties of DNA. Scientists are discovering that even the microscopic cells of our body testify to the existence of a creator. Well, hello, and welcome to the Fuel Bible Study. This is our supplemental teaching to the book of Romans, and we're specifically zoning in on Romans chapter 1, verse 20. This remarkable verse makes the claim that man knows intuitively that God exists. How does he get that knowledge? By observing God's creation. That's what Romans 1:20 and Psalm 19, 1 and 2 claim. Romans 1:20 says, "For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse." In other words, the universe cries out to mankind that there is a God. Furthermore, it says humanity was designed in such a way as to recognize its creator by his creation. So much so that it says that we are all without excuse. We cannot claim ignorance. Now, Psalm 19, 1 and 2. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. Scripture claims that creation is talking to man. And he's talking to man about God. But are we listening? Is there knowledge of God built in his creation? Do the latest scientific discoveries really point towards a creator? That's what we're going to be exploring in this study. The thought that God's existence is evidenced by his creation has been widely accepted for thousands of years. However, over the last century plus, there's been a challenge to that thought. And that challenge has come from various fields of science. What this has led to is a tension and an animosity between science and religion. We've been told that they're enemies on opposite sides of the spectrum. One deals with fairy tales, the other deals with facts. But the truth that is coming to light in an ever-increasing way is this: they are not enemies. As philosopher of science Stephen C. Meyer says, science done right points toward God. And so I would like to share with you evidence from various fields of science that point toward a creator, an intelligent designer. Now, I'm not sharing as a scientist, but as one who is deeply interested in science. And as a pastor, I am deeply interested in helping people who have been told that science disproves God. I firmly believe that that statement is false. Now, what I'm about to share with you just barely scratches the surface because there's a ton of incredible information out there. And this will be just a small sampling. Because if I were to try and do a comprehensive teaching on everything, there would be no end to this video. That's how much information there is out there. Now, the purpose of this teaching has three objectives. First, it's to build faith. Most of us have encountered attacks on our faith by something called militant atheism. Militant atheism scoffs and mocks belief in God. It considers it to be in the same category as believing in fairy tales. As a result, many have had their confidence regarding their belief in God shaken, shattered even. And this is sad because it shouldn't be. Because there is actually plenty of scientific evidence that supports a belief in God. Open-minded and brave scientists like Alan Sandage and Dean Kenyon demonstrate this for us. They show us that true faith is not blind or ignorant. Contrary to the scoffers out there, you do not have to throw out your intellect or your education to believe. The second purpose of this teaching is to stir up your hunger to know more, especially if you're seeking. Like I said, I'm barely going to scratch the surface of this incredible topic. And so it's my hope that this study will kind of whet your appetite and will lead you to further pursue the evidence for God. At the end of this video, I've included references to many resources that can aid you in your quest. And the third purpose that I want to do this is to give us more reasons to worship. Jesus said we would worship the Father in spirit and in truth. I believe the more we study God through the lens of science, the more we will see of him in science. We will see what Paul calls his hidden attributes, his glory, his power, his wisdom, his intellect, his love are all revealed through his creation, visible through science. And so upon seeing these things, it will cause awe and wonder to rise up in us and ignite worship. Worship of the awesome God who did all these things. Now, let's take a look at some of the scientific evidence that points to a creator. The first one being the evidence of fine-tuning. This evidence comes from the fields of astronomy and physics. Now, what do I mean when I say the evidence of fine-tuning? I mean the conditions in our galaxy and planet, when you look at them, appear to have been fine-tuned. Fine-tuned to the exact specifications needed to support complex life. Just one of these things being out of whack would have had a catastrophic effect on the development and sustaining of life. For further study on what I'm about to share, let me refer you to The Privileged Planet. That's a book by Guillermo Gonzalez and Jay Richards. In it, we find that many things, not just a few things, but many things went right on Earth for it to have yielded the complex life we have here. We find that we need to be at the right location in the galaxy. We are inside what's called the Circumcenter. If we were too close to the center, we'd be torn up by a black hole. If we were too far out, we wouldn't have the material needed to even be a planet. We are also located in a planetary system with giant planets like Jupiter and Saturn. What you might not know is that these giant planets work as shields to protect us. They prevent Earth from experiencing major asteroid impacts. We're also orbiting the right kind of star. Our sun is a spectral type G2 dwarf main sequence star. All that means to you and me is that it's just the right size. If the sun was smaller, we would have to be closer. However, this would cause increased gravity. That increased gravity would change Earth's rotation, and that would cause one side of the Earth to continually face the sun, causing extreme heat and increased radiation. Meanwhile, the other side would never see the sun. That would cause it to be an uninhabitable frozen wasteland. Moving on to our moon. Even our moon is special. The thinking is if the moon didn't exist, neither would we. It is larger than most normal natural satellites. And because of its great size, 1/4 the size of the Earth, it has a strong gravitational pull on the Earth. This gravitational pull stabilizes the tilt of our axis to 23.5 degrees. That angle, or that tilt of our axis, is important because it creates the 4 seasons we all take for granted. This gives us the only climate in the entire solar system mild enough to sustain complex life. And of course, the moon is the major factor behind our ocean's tides, which are very important. Tides help remove pollutants and circulate nutrients ocean plants and animals need to survive. Tides also affect the reproductive activities of fish and ocean plants. Tides are essential to the functioning of our planet. And more evidence of fine-tuning. Even the Earth's crust is just the right size. It's just thick enough to maintain plate tectonic activity. Plate tectonics, that does, it regulates the Earth's interior temperature, recycles carbon, and mixes the chemical elements that are essential to living organisms. Very important stuff. It also shapes the continents to allow for the diversity of life we have. Going inside the Earth now, even the movement of liquid iron in the Earth is important. It generates our protective magnetic shield, which is essential for life. Also, Earth's size is just right for life. If Earth was smaller, our magnetic field would be weaker. That would allow the solar wind to strip away our atmosphere. This would slowly transform the Earth into a dead, barren world like Mars. What about our atmosphere? Our atmosphere is also unique and very special. It is composed of a mixture of exactly 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 1% carbon dioxide. This ensures 3 extremely important things: a temperate climate, protection from the sun's radiation, and the correct combination of gases needed for liquid water and complex life. And speaking of water, water contains the chemical properties that just seem to be exquisitely suited for life. These chemical properties give it the ability to dissolve and transport the chemical nutrients vital to living organisms like you and me. It's also unmatched, water is, in its capacity to absorb the heat from the sun. This process of absorption is critical for regulating the Earth's surface temperature. And Earth is just the right distance from the sun to be able to have liquid water in abundance. If it were closer, water would be too hot and boil away. If it were too far, all surface water would be frozen. Earth truly resides in what scientists call the Goldilocks zone for water. Not too hot, not too cold, but just right. Now, let's think about the improbability of all of this occurring. In the privileged planet, we find that all these features, all these factors, they have to be met at one place in time in the galaxy if you're going to have a planet as habitable as the Earth, which you need for complex and even technological life. In an attempt to estimate the probability of attaining this combination of factors simultaneously, some researchers have developed an equation. I cannot explain or even say the size of this number, so I'm just going to display it on the screen. This is the probability that all these factors could occur simultaneously. What this tells us is that this can't happen, or at the very least, it's very unlikely to happen in the galaxy. And that's where the evidence is actually pushing us towards this conclusion, not away from it. In the words of Guillermo Gonzalez, to get life, you have to get it just right to have just one habitable planet like the Earth. What we have going on here on this planet is very rare indeed. Okay, so that was the fine-tuning argument from astronomy. Now, to understand the fine-tuning of the universe from physics, watch this.
From galaxies and stars, down to atoms and subatomic particles, the very structure of our universe is determined by these numbers. These are the fundamental constants and quantities of the universe. Scientists have come to the shocking realization that each of these numbers has been carefully dialed to an astonishingly precise value, a value that falls within an exceedingly narrow, life-permitting range. If any one of these numbers were altered by even a hair's breadth, no physical, interactive life of any kind could exist anywhere. There'd be no stars, no life, no planets, no chemistry. Consider gravity, for example. The force of gravity is determined by the gravitational constant. If this constant varied by just 1 in 10 to the 60th parts, none of us would exist. To understand how exceedingly narrow this life-permitting range is, imagine a dial divided into 10 to the 60th increments. To get a handle on how many tiny points on the dial this is, compare it to the number of cells in your body, or the number of seconds that have ticked by since time began. If the gravitational constant had been out of tune by just one of these infinitesimally small increments, the universe would either have expanded and thinned out so rapidly that no stars could form and life couldn't exist, or it would have collapsed back on itself with the same result: no stars, no planets, and no life. Or consider the expansion rate of the universe. This is driven by the cosmological constant. A change in its value by a mere 1 part in 10 to the 120th parts would cause the universe to expand too rapidly or too slowly. In either case, the universe would, again, be life-prohibiting. Or, another example of fine-tuning. If the mass and energy of the early universe were not evenly distributed to an incomprehensible precision of 1 part in 10 to the 10 to the 123rd, the universe would be hostile to life of any kind. The fact is, our universe permits physical, interactive life only because these, and many other numbers, have been independently and exquisitely balanced on a razor's edge. Wherever physicists look, they see examples of fine-tuning. The remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life. If anyone claims not to be surprised by the special features that the universe has, he's hiding his head in the sand. These special features are surprising and unlikely. What is the best explanation for this astounding phenomenon? There are three live options. The fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. Which of these options is the most plausible? According to this alternative, the universe must be life-permitting. The precise values of these constants and quantities could not be otherwise. But is this plausible? Is a life-prohibiting universe impossible? Far from it. It's not only possible, it's far more likely than a life-permitting universe. The constants and quantities are not determined by the laws of nature. There's no reason or evidence suggests that fine-tuning is necessary. How about chance? Did we just get really, 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 really lucky? No. The probabilities involved are so ridiculously remote as to put the fine-tuning well beyond the reach of chance. So, in an effort to keep this option alive, some have gone beyond empirical science and opted for a more speculative approach, known as the multiverse. They imagine a universe generator that cranks out such a vast number of universes that, odds are, life-permitting universes will eventually pop out. However, there's no scientific evidence for the existence of this multiverse. It cannot be detected, observed, measured, or proved. And the universe generator itself would require an enormous amount of fine-tuning. Furthermore, small patches of order are far more probable than big ones. So the most probable observable universe would be a small one, inhabited by a single, simple observer. But what we actually observe is the very thing that we should least expect: a vast, spectacularly complex, highly ordered universe, inhabited by billions of other observers. So even if the multiverse existed, which is a moot point, it wouldn't do anything to explain the fine-tuning. Given the implausibility of physical necessity or chance, the best explanation for why the universe is fine-tuned for life may very well be it was designed that way. A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a superintellect monkeyed with physics, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge.
Next, we'll look at the evidence of cosmology. Remember, cosmology is a field of astronomy that studies the origin of the universe. And the cosmological argument for the existence of God has actually been around for hundreds of years. In recent years, though, it has been developed further and refined by the Christian theologian, apologist, and author William Lane Craig. So what I'm about to share with you comes directly from his ministry's website, which you can check out at reasonablefaith.org. Now, take a look at this video.
Does God exist? Or is the material universe all that is, or ever was, or ever will be? One approach to answering this question is the cosmological argument. It goes like this: whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore, the universe has a cause. Is the first premise true? Let's consider. Believing that something can pop into existence without a cause is more of a stretch than believing in magic. At least with magic, you've got a hat and a magician. And if something can come into being from nothing, then why don't we see this happening all the time? No, everyday experience and scientific evidence confirm our first premise. If something begins to exist, it must have a cause. But what about our second premise? Did the universe begin, or has it always existed? Atheists have typically said that the universe has been here forever. The universe is just there, and that's all. First, let's consider the second law of thermodynamics. It tells us the universe is slowly running out of usable energy, and that's the point. If the universe had been here forever, it would have run out of usable energy by now. The second law points us to a universe that has a definite beginning. This is further confirmed by a series of remarkable scientific discoveries. In 1915, Albert Einstein presented his general theory of relativity. This allowed us, for the first time, to talk meaningfully about the past history of the universe. Next, Alexander Friedmann and George Lemaitre, each working with Einstein's equations, predicted that the universe is expanding. Then in 1929, Edwin Hubble measured the red shift in light from distant galaxies. This empirical evidence confirmed not only that the universe is expanding, but that it sprang into being from a single point in the finite past. It was a monumental discovery, almost beyond comprehension. However, not everyone is fond of a finite universe, so it wasn't long before alternative models popped into existence. But one by one, these models failed to stand the test of time. More recently, 3 leading cosmologists, Arvind Borde, Alan Guth, and Alexander Vilenkin, prove that any universe which has on average been expanding throughout its history cannot be eternal in the past, but must have an absolute beginning. This even applies to the multiverse, if there is such a thing. This means that scientists can no longer hide behind a past eternal universe. There is no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning. Any adequate model must have a beginning, just like the standard model. It's quite plausible then that both premises of the argument are true. This means that the conclusion is also true. The universe has a cause. And since the universe can't cause itself, its cause must be beyond the space-time universe. It must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, uncaused, and unimaginably powerful, much like God. The cosmological argument shows that, in fact, it is quite reasonable to believe that God does exist.
The next evidence we're going to talk about is biological information found in the cell. I'm talking about DNA. The massive amount of information stored in every cell caused biophysicist Dean Kenyon to reject his own book. His book was on how life began, but the digital code of DNA caused him to change his mind. Professor Kenyon now believes that the best scientific evidence points toward a creator of life. He, like many others, believe there is evidence of God in the DNA of the cell. So what exactly is in DNA that is making scientists reject naturalism and become creationists? In a word, code. We know that computer programs use binary codes, ones and zeros arranged in various sequences. This code gives instructions so the computer will do what the designer of the program wants it to. In the same way, all the functions that take place inside the cell of the body are controlled by code. This code is in each one of our DNA, and DNA is found inside the nucleus of every cell of our body. Now, how does this point to a creator? Let's do an illustration. You're walking alone on a beach. You are enjoying the ocean air and taking in the beautiful scenery. The waves are crashing on the shore, seagulls fly overhead. But then, all of a sudden, you see a message written in the sand. It says, "The Pittsburgh Steelers are the best football team in the world." Would you conclude that those words were randomly caused by the waves striking the sand? Of course not. That would be impossible. You would understand that that message came from a Steelers fan, right? And that's because that message is information, coherent information. And such coherent information must have been produced by some form of an intelligent mind. It would be absurd to say that this message just randomly appeared on the beach. According to Dr. Francis Collins, director of the Human Genome Project, that's how it is with DNA. He says that DNA is just like an instructional script in a software program. But instead of being on a computer, this code is sitting in the very nucleus of each of our cells. The complexity of the code in our DNA is mind-boggling. Just like the ones and zeros that make up the code of software programs, DNA code provides instructions for the way our whole body functions. Remember, there's a copy of this DNA code in every cell of the body. This code is nearly, imagine this, 3 billion letters long. 3 billion letters worth of instructional code, all giving instructions to the amazing machine known as the human body. Now, let's go back to the illustration of the message written on the beach. Think about it. If such a simple message written on the beach cannot be written by chance, if it requires an intelligent mind to produce it, then how could it be possible to randomly produce this complex code of 3 billion letters inside the nucleus of each cell? The short answer is it couldn't. A superintelligence, the likes of which we can barely fathom, is the only logical answer to this. Some more interesting facts. Your DNA code contains all the information that makes up all the physical features and traits you possess. This 3 billion letter code is so long that if a person types 60 words per minute for 8 hours a day, it would take 50 years to type the code out. And this is not just about code length. The code must actually function. It must instruct the cells to flawlessly complete highly complex tasks. A program like this is far beyond the limits of even a human mind, never mind being randomly generated. By the way, no program has ever been written by chance. IT professionals will tell you that it takes a great amount of effort just to write a few simple codes, just to write even one simple code of just a few hundred words. Writing something like the code in our DNA is almost beyond our understanding. So in this we see that God has revealed his existence in the very cells of life. As they evaluate the stunning evidence DNA provides, many fair-minded skeptics, scientists included, are taking note. And they are reevaluating their beliefs concerning God. As for me personally, the more I looked at this, the more blown away I've been by it. And the more convinced I am that it is undeniable proof regarding the existence of God. So there we have it. Just some of the powerful evidence from science that points to a creator. Like I said, there are many more, but time, as well as my limitations as a teacher, prevent us from going further. The unmovable skeptic will always demand more. However, just this information that we went over in our study should be enough for any fair-minded skeptic to at least begin to explore the evidence. And if you would like to explore further, let this video continue to play after I sign off so you can see many of the great resources that are available out there. And on that note, thank you again for watching. This is Pastor Chris, praying that God continues to bless you and yours.